Hi, welcome to Represent NYC. I'm Assemblymember Deborah Glick. I represent parts of Lower Manhattan, including the Village East and West, Soho, and Tribeca. I'm also the prime sponsor of the Reproductive Health Act in the New York State Assembly. On today's show, we will discuss the status of reproductive health in New York, including the Reproductive Health Act. To do so, I am joined by two esteemed guests, State Senator Liz Krueger and patient advocate Erika Christensen. Senator Krueger represents the Upper East Side. She is the prime sponsor of the RHA in the state Senate. Erika Christensen is a patient advocate and co-founder of the grassroots group RHA Vote, which focuses on educating New Yorkers about the problems with current New York State abortion laws and all of our efforts to fix it. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let me just start by giving a little bit of background for our viewers on what the Reproductive Health Act is. Our laws changed in 1970, which predated the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. So our laws are a little bit outdated, and they do not include some of the protections that existed in Roe. The bill was actually passed, interestingly enough, by Republicans in both the Assembly and the Senate and a Republican governor. So at the time, it was not a partisan issue. So the bill would take the abortion laws out of the criminal code where they currently reside and put them into the health code where they belong. And it would also say that a person who is pregnant should have both their health and their life protected. Currently, it is only the life of the patient that is, in fact, protected. In addition, the bill would make it clear that a patient would not have to carry a non-viable fetus to term. Finally, the bill would say, you know, the laws existed 48 years ago, and now we have other medical professionals who, within the scope of their practice, are legally licensed to perform abortion services. So the bill updates our laws and make it clear that women should be able to control their own reproductive destiny. We've passed it in the Assembly 6 times now, but it has not even come up for a vote in the state Senate. So, Liz, can you just give us a clue about the status of the bill in the Senate and whether or not there's any prospect for the Senate returning to vote on it since it is live for the rest of this year?
So, you are absolutely right. You do pass it year after year in the Assembly. Thank you very much, Deborah Glick and the Assembly members. I serve in a Senate that is controlled by a Republican majority leader, John Flanagan. And while you pointed out historically, abortion rights and protections of women and their families was not a partisan issue, today in 2018 we find ourselves in a situation where it's a very partisan issue. And so while all 31 existing Democratic senators have said that they would absolutely vote in support of the bill, you need 32 members to pass a bill. And John Flanagan, being the leader of the Senate, is the only one who decides what bills come up for a vote. So we have 2 problems in the Senate. Even if I can get that 30-second vote publicly announced, Democrat or Republican, because there's this weird situation where there's one senator who says he's both and serves with the Republicans, Simcha Felder from Brooklyn. He has said he's a no vote. There are a few Republicans who say privately they'd be a yes vote if it comes to the floor, but we have to get it to the floor. And John Flanagan determines whether or not we go back to Albany before the end of 2018 and what bills would come up on the floor. And so far, he has been absolutely no. Now, it is shocking to me because this isn't a partisan issue. There are women and families in every district of the state who actually are suffering because we have antiquated laws. And of course, we have that Supreme Court change hanging over our head. We'll probably get to that later. So Disappointingly, I have to tell you, I find it very unlikely this bill will pass the Senate in 2018. On the other hand, I'm much more optimistic about a different majority leader in 2019 after the November elections, a different formula of senators in the state Senate after November, and I'm feeling much more optimistic if you ask me the question, can we pass that bill in 2019?
Well, that actually assumes that the question I was going to ask has been asked. Do you think that this particular bill will in fact have an impact on November elections? Or do you think that there are other things happening in the ethos that will change the...
I think this issue is one of the issues that can have a significant impact in certain districts in November, because I find when I go out and help Democratic candidates who are campaigning to win Senate seats, and they talk about their support for the Reproductive Health Act and what it means, and that the existing senator will not come out in support of the bill or even ask for it to be voted on in the Senate, even if they aren't going to vote for it, that public opinion is, frankly, initially quite shocked and then angry. The public is very aware of the risks to our rights, particularly under the Trump administration's current executive actions, and the no longer really hypothetical what happens when the Supreme Court gets a case that challenges our right to Roe v. Wade protection. So people get it. They see it as it's just around the corner. And so the fundamental statement, the states have to take care of us by passing the right laws, including reproductive health laws, because we can't count on Washington, really is translating to voters all over the state on a whole host of issues, but reproductive health is clearly one of them. I would say environmental issues also have people sitting up and going, what? The federal government is doing what? What is New York State doing to protect us? So people more and more are asking you and me and other people running for office, what are you doing to make sure that in New York State we have the rights and protections we thought we had all this time, because we don't believe Washington's there for us?
Well, even if we aren't on the cusp of a problem with Roe v. Wade, today there are women and families in New York who are confronted with serious problems when they have a health crisis and are pregnant. So that leads me to asking you, Erika, to explain to us a little bit about your journey in this area and what problems you faced in accessing proper health care in New York State when you had a medical emergency and a pregnancy.
Sure. And I'll try to make a very complicated situation as short and concise as possible, which anyone who knows pregnancy knows that can be difficult. I was 30 weeks into a very complicated pregnancy when we found out that the fetus I was carrying was incompatible with life on the outside of my body. This was after, many months of one complication after the next, but we had enough hope that we wanted to keep, seeing it through. Our doctors thought, oh, let's just keep watching. And then at 30 weeks, growth fell off the chart. My fluid levels were very high. There were a lot of serious muscular indications that kind of gave us that last bad fetal diagnosis from our doctors. When we heard that the only scenario that we were looking at, if I were to make it all the way to term, which was not actually, totally sure in my case, I could have had a later miscarriage at risk to my health. But if I made it to term, I would be giving birth to a baby who would choke for a short few minutes and then die. And when we heard that, I think my husband and I immediately thought, well, if there's anything we can do to prevent that outcome, that's the course of treatment we would like to explore. And that's when we found out from our doctors on the Upper East Side of Manhattan that they would not be able to take care of us, that because of the limits of the law in New York State, I would have to seek care elsewhere. We were, of course, shocked, but I think in the moment when you're dealing with, in a medical emergency, you're just trying to solve the problem. And because we are incredibly privileged on multiple levels, we speak English as a first language. We have, higher than average reading comprehension skills. We have parents who stepped in and helped us pay for medical care when at that point we realized we would have to go out of network, because when you get on a plane for medical care, you're probably going to be pretty far out of network. And I had strong private insurance at the time. So my mom scrambled and took thousands of dollars out of her retirement, and she's about near retirement age. And this was all a scramble. We were also coordinating doctors across the country. In our case, I got care in Colorado, one of the 3 states who will allow patients from out of state to come in for abortion care. So it took us some time to get all of the logistics together, last-minute flights, hotels, a rental car from Denver to Boulder. We took care of all of that as quickly as we could, but that took 2 weeks. You're dealing with different time zones. So it was 32 weeks before I could get on a plane and fly across the country to end my pregnancy. I'll say going through an airport at that point is very difficult and very painful. The doctor warns you, if TSA tries to stop you, tell them you're pregnant with twins, so that they'll let you fly. There's all of these injustices that you experience along the way. Once there, I received really compassionate, amazing health care from the doctors in Colorado. After that, kind of in the aftermath, we started to grapple with everything that had happened, and we realized, if we had not been able to solve this problem on our own, what did New York State expect us to do? And now we know they expected us to carry that doomed pregnancy. Whatever the outcome, until it reached a level where my life was threatened. They would have had to be concerned that I was dying before doctors in New York could legally step in and help me. When we started to put those pieces together and, consider all the situations where any of those privileges we had in place were not there, and all of the people that are falling through the cracks, it just became our life's mission to fix it. And that's what we've been doing ever since. And we've met patients from all over New York State, in rural areas, all across the city. And these are, compassionate people who very much wanted to be parents, but found themselves in these really horrible, medical situations. I also want to acknowledge, yes, it's often in cases like mine, but also due to, the inequities in our system, and this situation in our state where only doctors are able to administer abortion care. This means that people are sometimes not able to get the abortions earlier that they seek. And therefore, if they're trying to find a provider, especially in more rural parts of the state, in that, scrambling, as they're trying to get money together, maybe care for the children they already have, as 60% of people who get abortions are already mothers. That pushes the line, right? So they might find themselves in a situation where they're really battling that cutoff that we have because they're poor, or maybe they're in an abusive situation. Also, I was in a loving, supportive relationship. That's another privilege that not everyone has. So we always want to include, the entirety of the situation, the people who are seeking later abortions, and we want to support those people. We don't want to further stigmatize them by, discussing this as a criminal issue, which I think, at least at this table, we know we can agree that it's not.
Right. Abortion is a medical procedure, not a crime.
That's right.
And 70% of people believe that a woman should be in control of her own health care. And that has not really changed over the years. People understand that this is a crisis when people face it. Now, that's why you started RHA Vote?
That's right. We realized as we started to work with groups in New York and work with the both of you and try to support the best we can the amazing work you're doing at the legislative level, we realized that there was sort of a vacuum of the people, of kind of representing the people who are actually affected by these laws. You can talk about it theoretically, but until you hear from families like ours who have been affected, it's hard to put it together. You hear a lot of, you should be able to figure out an abortion by 24 weeks, And before I was affected, I admit maybe I would have entertained that idea because I couldn't, it was theoretical to me. And we're trying to inject real stories and fill that vacuum with actual stories and facts from New Yorkers who have been actually affected by the law.
Because of what Erika was saying, what I've learned working on this bill and working with so many incredible men and women like Erika, it's also because our science has changed. So. Yes. 35 years ago, there were not a series of tests that doctors would be able to use at the 25, 30-week mark where they would say, oh, something suddenly has gone very wrong since your last set of tests, and now we know ABC. And so the question that I get sometimes is, well, why aren't women just taking care of this earlier in their pregnancies? And the answer is because they really wanted this pregnancy. And thanks to modern medicine, they're only learning that they are in a crisis of life and health for themselves and the viability of this fetus much later in the pregnancies, which is why we have to make sure that you and I are successful in passing laws in New York State that can guarantee that medicine is there to provide the services that pregnant women need at any time during their pregnancy. People weren't even knowing about that Erika could find out this kind of information at the 30-week mark if we talked to them 20 years ago. It just wasn't realistic for us to know, and now we know.
Yes, and I think that for me, as a member of the LGBTQ community, one of the things that I think helped advance the gay movement was the fact that people came out and talked about this. Mm-hmm. And so it's vitally important that we have these conversations to remove the shame, the stigma. There is a hashtag, Shout Your Abortion, which was started by Amelia, I hope I don't mispronounce her name, Bono, in order to give women the opportunity to be public about the fact that they've had an abortion, because a very substantial percentage of women have had an abortion by the time they are 45 for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. It may be their health. It may be because, pregnancy is not a risk-free situation. People who think that youngsters should be, the issue of parental consent and a 14 or 15-year-old who may have been impregnated by a parent or a parent's boyfriend should not be in the situation of being forced to carry a pregnancy to term, because there are health risks involved in pregnancy. So it's about women's health. And while we talk about reproductive health, it is really women's health and women's ability to control their health with a healthcare professional instead of a legislator or somebody down the street who likes to hold a sign in front of a health clinic. So it is important, I think, not only having this kind of conversation, but for individuals who have had an abortion to be public about it. Many years ago, there was a brochure that was put out by NARAL that had stories from women about, I've had 5 children. My husband and I can't afford another child. We weren't looking to have another child, and we have 5 children that we can barely provide for.
Right before we went on air, Erika and I were discussing an article that just came out from the Forward, which is a Jewish newspaper, and it was stories of Orthodox women choosing to have abortions, and in some cases being in a similar scenario to what Erika went through, and they're going to their rebbes, and their rebbes advising them, we will support you, this is not a violation of Jewish law, and we will help you in whatever decision you make. And I was personally so excited to see that article, because I have had several conversations with my colleague, Senator Felder, who represents a very Orthodox community in Brooklyn, where he said it's a violation of Jewish law. And I've been telling him, no, you may interpret Jewish law that way, but actually I am also Jewish, and I've had discussions with rabbis who make it very clear it's not in violation of Jewish law. And then he has said, but Orthodox Jewish law. And so to get an article in my hands that has descriptions of individual women coming forward, as you said, telling their own stories. And then Erika told me, because she had been working with some of these women, that, do you know, they're flying to Israel because they can't get the health care they need here for their life and health. And then they come back and just say they had a miscarriage. What are we doing to the women of the state? It is outrageous that the bill you can pass year after year in the Assembly is not yet passed in the Senate. We need everyone's help to follow the lead of Erika to push this issue from a vote perspective in the upcoming elections.
Erika, your RHA vote. So what kind of activities would you encourage people to engage in so that they can connect with other people in their areas, or what other suggestions do you have?
Well, I mean, I think as you were sort of discussing earlier, I do think this starts with story sharing. You know, if this issue has not affected you personally, maybe, you know, you have never run up against the law in New York, but now, you know, these stories are out there. You know, I've certainly shared more details about our story, but there are so many others. You know, find one that speaks to you and share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook, send it to your aunt who just can't understand why anyone would need an abortion after 24 weeks. You know, say, well, actually, Auntie, in some cases it's necessary and here's why. I mean, we have changed minds with stories, so we know that it works. It's very hard to, you know, to kind of keep shouting theoretically when someone is putting concrete information in front of you. So that's one very important thing I think you can do. I think you can find out where your representatives stand on this issue, particularly if you're on Long Island. You know, whoever represents you on Long Island, look into it. See where they stand on the Reproductive Health Act. If they don't support our bill for some reason, you know, maybe look into other candidates, find one who does. Ask them, talk to them about it, and make sure they know this is something that's important to you. Write letters, write to your local papers, write op-eds, write letters to the editor, and make sure, you know, the only way we're going to make anyone care about this is if we, you know, say loudly that it's something that we care about. I mean, you guys are politicians, you know that. I mean, when's the last time a quiet wheel got any attention? So we have to be really squeaky on this. And I really believe that, I mean, we have seen the attention around this issue radically change in the last 2 years. So, you know, we see a path to the light on this one. And we should all be thrilled to be a part of it.
On that note, the Eleanor's Legacy is an organization. Many people may be familiar with Emily's List, which is national, but Eleanor's Legacy is a New York State organization that supports pro-choice Democratic women. Sadly, we don't have a great many pro-choice Republicans. We've lost a couple in the state assembly over the last several years. Some women, wonderful colleagues from upstate, retired. And the Republican Party has been less and less welcoming to pro-choice candidates. So Eleanor's Legacy is one place where people can go to their website and see candidates who are running. There are many Senate candidates this year. There's a Baker Project, which is named after Martha Baker, who was a wonderful activist on many, many issues. And it's an attempt to support pro-choice Democratic women all over the state.
Right, right. They're doing a terrific job. I believe they have 11 Democratic women running for the state Senate. They are all 100% pro-choice. All of Eleanor's Legacy candidates, that's their one litmus test, that you are a pro-choice candidate. And there do seem to be phenomenal people running for, even phenomenal men running for the state Senate in quite a few districts who are also pro-choice. I don't think any of the Democratic candidates for the state Senate in any district are not pro-choice. And as you pointed out before, Deborah, public opinion supports our position. Public opinion is that we should be upholding Roe v. Wade, and we should be upholding every family's right to make their own decisions when it comes to reproduction. And of course, that assignment just got tougher with the Trump administration gag rule, which would take another whole half-hour show, but is also going to very quickly translate into healthcare providers being told not even to discuss abortion as an option for pregnant women who find themselves in difficult situations, which is really, I think, un-American. So we have healthcare procedures that can save a life, and now we will have providers of healthcare who are not even allowed to discuss the full range of medical options with us or risk losing any funding they get from the federal government. It's appalling.
Well, it's definitely part of the attack on Planned Parenthood. And it is also a violation of medical ethics. So you're putting healthcare providers in this situation where they are violating the rules and tenets of their associations and their profession. So it's an increasingly difficult time. There are also organizations, crisis pregnancy centers, that mislead women into thinking that they can provide them with support, and yet they cannot. But this has been incredibly, the time goes so quickly. Yes. We have to wrap up, and I want to thank you both for being here and for all the work you do on behalf of New Yorkers, and especially reproductive justice. And we have a lot of work in front of us, especially as we lead up to those important November elections. And I am so pleased to have allies like the both of you at my side so that we can continue the fight to protect New Yorkers. Thank you so much for being here.